Please join me as we welcome this esteemed panel. I'd like to introduce to you the speaker, the MC that's been doing, all the sessions today?
This is a special one.
Miss Maggie Linton.
Thank you. All right. Guys, we're just going to jump right into it. Hang on a second, my phone just went blank, and this is where the picture is. It's one of those days. I said, where's my script? They said, oh, you didn't get it? No. All right. Our belief in equal opportunity and self-determination is considered part of the bedrock of our nation, and diversity is one of our country's greatest strengths. But for far too many, this version of the American dream remains out of reach. Entrenched disparities in our laws and public policies and in our public and private institutions have often denied equal opportunity to individuals and communities. The converging health and economic crisis have exposed and spotlighted these inequities, while a historic social justice movement has put the spotlight on the no longer bearable human cost of systematic racism. How can we increase income and opportunity for our most vulnerable communities? What can be done to grow? And I'm just going to let you all introduce yourselves, and also let's just talk. Once everybody's introduced, then we will get into the discussion of advancing, because the advancement is what opens the doors to opportunities. Let's begin with you, sir.
Thank you very much, Maggie. Great to be here. Great to see everyone out in the audience, and to this phenomenal group of folks. Don D. Edwards from Wells Fargo. I am responsible within our diverse segments team within the home lending business to drive a business model associated with economic impact and growth, where the target is trying to drive interoperability within the enterprise with our external partners, corporate, community, legislative, to focus on strategies that will actually help close the wealth creation gap, specifically initially targeting home ownership.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ron Jarman. I'm the acting director of the U.S. Census Bureau. Hopefully you all filled out your census last year and got counted. But the Census Bureau's job, all 10 years out of a decade, is to measure the people and the economy of our great country. And so, I'm really pleased to be here. We have a lot of tools that can help address these issues, both at the community level, the state level, the national level. But we have a lot of work to do to make our data even better for this. And so looking forward to working with you all to do that going forward. Thank you.
Hi, excuse me. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zondwa Mandela. I'm the chairman of an organization called Mandela Legacy Foundation. Our primary focus is around job creation. South Africa has one of the highest unemployment rates globally, and those most affected by unemployment are in fact the youth. So we focus on creating opportunity, but most importantly, hope through jobs. Our 4 key pillars are job creation, women in leadership, training and education, and financial literacy.
I'm Josh Smith, founder of the Fourth Purpose Foundation. The foundation focuses on the fourth purpose of incarceration, which is rehabilitation. And what we say is we need to change that to transformation. So our whole mission is to make prison a place of transformation. And my story deals with much more of that, but our focus is in the prison sector.
Being from Leavenworth, Kansas, I know a lot about prisons. And also, I now live in Jessup, Maryland, which has 11 prisons within like 5 miles of where I live. So but all of you and each of you, please, let's begin with what you think, or your organization that you're representing thinks about how the door for opportunity can open wider for all.
Sure, great question. So here's the way that I personally think about it, and the bank has responded. So when it comes to wealth creation, specifically for people of color, and we'll talk about black folks for a second, we often associate impoverished conditions with the person. And when we think about that, we typecast and we will treat you a certain way. The way that the U.S. has gone at wealth creation has been through a philanthropic model. There's nothing wrong with philanthropic dollars. However, you can't give enough money away to close a wealth gap. So the approach that we're taking is to develop a business-led model to actually addressing what is really an economic issue that has business implications for especially banks, financial services organizations. And the way I think about this, and I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk in more detail, but I think about it very simply like business. And the notion is, when you're trying to address a business problem, the first thing is to frame it properly. If we frame this issue as a philanthropic or a social issue only, then businesses don't have a place to play. They have a place to play through their philanthropic organizations, but that's not the reason why businesses exist. Businesses exist to do business. So if we frame it as an economic issue with business implications, we will treat it as such. So once we frame it properly, it gives us an opportunity to engage our best selves in the process. It gives us an opportunity to close the barriers internally, across our divisions. It gives us a way to engage stakeholders external to the bank who would come alongside us because we showed up. And then we decide a very simplistic vision for what we're going to do to address the problem. Simply put, this is about expanding the market. And when you think about specifically where we'll focus, if you look at wealth creation, there are 8 dimensions of wealth creation where people of color have been left out. And those dimensions are around home ownership, jobs, earnings, the poverty level, business ownership, participation in the criminal justice system, academic outcomes, and healthcare outcomes. Home ownership happens to be the #1 lever that has driven intergenerational wealth, wealth transfer, and the creation of wealth in the last 150 years. So it becomes, Wells Fargo, for instance, happens to be the 3rd largest bank in the U.S. We've got something on the order of $1.8 trillion in assets. So we have a role to play. So we've looked at this and said, hey, if the simple vision is expanding the marketplace, then, well, what would you do anytime you were looking to address a market? You'd understand what the customers need. You'd figure out how your business capabilities and core competencies align to it. You would decide if now is the time for you to engage. Once you decided it was time for you to engage, you would align all the resources that made sense. You'd identify someone to run it. You'd set some goals. You'd measure it, monitor it, and you'd celebrate. Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. And I think about the black consumer very specifically from a business perspective. So years ago, I ran customer experience strategy for one of the business segments within our community bank. Customer experience and loyalty is often thought about like frequent flyer miles, something that's fun and cool. But the reality is that there's science behind the customer experience and customer loyalty. Loyal customers spend more. They will try more of the products and services that you offer. They will tell more people about your products and services and refer them to you. They will stay with you longer. They are cheaper to market to, and when you have a problem in their service, they will treat it as a momentary blip and not a permanent issue. Black people are the most loyal customers, period, and it's not close. When you think about the statistics that determine loyalty, black folks will tell you that they are more likely to stay with a brand that they trust, about 48% compared to the national average at 35%, and our white constituents closer to 16, or closer to 32 actually. So every company, although they may not have a strategy for DE&I and economic empowerment, they're all looking for loyal customers. So if you're trying to set yourself up for the future and you're looking at this from a business lens, then look at it from a business lens. I'm trying to help the company expand the market with one of the most valuable consumer bases that we could tap where there's an unmet need. So fundamentally, that's the way that I think about it within Wells Fargo.
Do you, not to the next one, do you find people sometimes frozen in place with not knowing how to make the next move and finding it difficult to make that move to find that equal amount of justice and services that they need?
Well, I think so. That's largely true because people don't know what's out there that's available to them to help them. And so as a statistical agency, that sort of measures the very topics that we're talking about today, income and wealth inequality. We've traditionally been an organization that's there to serve the government. and we produce statistics that the government uses to understand these problems and use government solutions to address them. But I think because of both wanting to, sort of do the right thing, but also because we have challenges getting people to participate in our data collection programs, we're doing much more now to try to address, families, households, small business owners, and creating data tools that are useful for them in their daily lives that help them, sort of take their own life and to move out and to make plans. So we have things like the Small Business Builder that helps small businesses across the country look at their community, see what's there from both the business and the consumer side. They can use the information from there to help with getting financing and what have you. So things that are like useful to folks, as they make their own individual plans. And I think to the extent that organizations like the Census Bureau can make these tools that help people help themselves, I think we can start to help address some of these things at a real fundamental, personal level. So.
And there was so much controversy about the census this past year, because of who we had at the top, and tried to stop so much information. And people do not realize how much that information is important for the next decade. It's not just for tomorrow or a month from now. It's for the next decade, and how important it is to be counted.
Absolutely, and it's not just the decennial census, it's all the things that we do on an ongoing basis. We're out in the field every month collecting data that underlies the unemployment rate, all of the sort of economic indicators that you read about in the newspaper. And people often think, well, we only need to participate in these things when there's TV ads and stuff like that. But it's absolutely critical that we get the participation of the public, and that's one of the reasons why we're trying to give the public back some value added for their participation.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about economic empowerment from your point of view.
So, I'm very lucky to come from a legacy that's always focused on the interests of the people, fighting for human rights, equality. And a lot of this was largely done through the political space and, addressing a lot of social issues. And we realized at some point that in order to address a lot of these systemic issues that people are facing, we would need to start introducing a lot more sustainable and commercially viable programs. And that's why, job creation then became very critical. And I'll pretty much start painting a picture of the situation in South Africa. So I did mention earlier on that South Africa has one of the largest unemployment rates. We've got a headline unemployment rate of at least 38%. And if you dig deeper into that statistic, between the youth aged 15 to 35, you've got an unemployment rate of at least 38%, which is quite scary. But if you dig deeper into that particular demographic, 60% of those people most affected by unemployment are in fact young women, young black women, right? So our primary objective was really very simple, that we need to start driving opportunity. I'm very clear that in order for Africa to get ahead, we need to start focusing on an Africa that is primarily focused on trade and not aid, right? And in order to address economic empowerment, we need to create opportunity for people. We create opportunity for people by creating jobs. Yeah. And in many instances, it's our black communities that are in fact left behind, right? We are the ones who lose out on upward economic mobility. So our primary objective is very simple. Give people that have never had an opportunity a fair opportunity in life. The circumstance of young people in South Africa, we've got brilliant young people, although some may have not completed school, some may have not, even had a first-time job, and some have not even gone to tertiary level. And the reality is that too many times does the system assume that people are not capable. And the reality is that people are very capable, they've just never been given the right opportunity. So ours is just to simply ensure that within certain sectors, and one of our primary focal sectors is the BPO sector. BPO is an acronym for Business Process Outsourcing, which is a fancy word for call centers. And we focus on that particular industry because it has the potential to not only employ one person, but it has the ability to employ tens and hundreds of thousands of people almost immediately. We've currently employed almost over 15,000 young people, and we've impacted 200,000 lives. And the reality is that in the situation of South Africa, the moment you impact someone's life positively in terms of giving them a job, that has a direct impact on at least 6 people that are connected to them, right? And so all we're then just saying is that we want people economically independent. We want them to be, not only consumers, but to have the ability to decide what those decisions are. In relation to the focus on women in leadership and why we are actually even biased into that particular group, is that we've also done studies that show that 15% of what women earn versus to what men earn, in fact, makes it back into the community. So the objective is very simple: give people a job. It's a basic and simple way to allow the upward mobility of communities, because people are now able to contribute better to their choices and provide for those closest to them.
All right, thank you. All right, prison man. Recidivism is so very, very, very important. I know it because I've seen it in my hometown. But so many of the people who are in prison, number one, are minorities, but even more so, have walked away from education, which might have prevented them from even going in the first place. Let's talk about what prisons are doing to help raise the education level, but also leave with skills.
Thank you. Well, some, to answer that question, not much. Some are doing a much better job. I think I tie everything to my own story, and I think through, you asked a great question earlier, basically asking, do they know? Like, do they understand? And I've been a large employer in our area and had jobs available and struggled to fill those jobs. And so opportunity, I think, is important. But the two things I would put before that for some is first exposure and then education. So go back. My life started, my father left very young, 2 years old. My mother said she could afford good housing or good child care, but she couldn't afford both. So that meant we moved into the inner cities, and she survived as a single mom. I was moved out of the home from an abusive situation from another man at the age of 13, and then at the age of 16 I had 10 felonies on my record, just burglaries and thefts and going around running the streets, and then at 10th grade I was out of school. You can write the rest of the story a little bit. By the time I was 21 I was in prison, serving 5 years for drugs. But here's what changed. I was exposed to something. So my charge was a federal charge. So that meant I got put in with the people that did fraud, that didn't pay their taxes, and I was exposed to a lot of white-collar, very wealthy people. And I began to listen, and I began to ask questions, and I began to watch what they did. I read what they read. I would walk with them on the track, and I got exposed, and I just always thought it was us and them. I didn't think that was available to me. Afterwards, I got out, my situation the same. My wife and now 2 children living in government housing. Same cycle, food stamps, all the same things. But this had changed. And so I began to work hard. I started a little business, and I scraped and scratched, and I kept reading those same books and kept getting around these same mentors. And that business became very successful, and now I'm involved in a lot of businesses, and that's how we funded the foundation. That was over $10 million of proceeds of one of our companies selling. I ask the question this all the time, but for a lack of investment, but for an investment in me, where I was at, what would my life look like? And how many other lives are sitting incarcerated or even in our impoverished areas. And what they see is what they see on TV. We see rappers or athletes, right? That's what we aspire to be. John Hope even talks about this a lot, of how he saw a banker in a tie, in a suit and tie. And he goes, "What do you do?" And the guy told him, he goes, "Whatever it is, I don't understand, but that's what I want to be." I think that we've not had enough exposure in these areas to even understand that a job is what we would want, right? Or that, hey, we need to go and do this. And I think that we're going to have to look at bigger things to change the culture, to really truly fix our impoverished areas. And again, my heart and focus on the prison, because many times that's those of us, look, there's bad people in prison, but if you listen and you talk to each and every one of them, you will learn a story. You will hear a story of something that happened in their life. Are there people that grow up in great neighborhoods and go to prison? Yes, but so very few. So very few. And so how do we expose people? How do we give them education after that, and then line it up with opportunity to be able to act and do something with it?
All right. Believe it or not, we only have, 4 minutes now? All right. I'm going to give each of you about 30, 45 seconds to, I know this is crazy. This could be so much more of a question. I'd love to take questions from the audience. But wrap that up in 45 seconds or so. Talk about the opportunities that each of your organizations give.
So Wells Fargo has a dedicated focus. Our head of home lending is a black woman named Christy Furco. Christy is the only African-American woman to lead a major mortgage lending institution in the country, and the first ever to take the position as chair of the Mortgage Bankers Association. And as much as she serves the entire U.S., at one point Wells Fargo had 1 in 6 mortgages in the U.S., but as much as she serves the entire U.S., she certainly has a very focused interest in helping African Americans achieve the American dream. What I would suggest as you go off into your corners of the world, we have to build trust. With African Americans, trust is paramount. There have been so many promises made and so many promises broken. It'll be important for us to build trust. It'll also be important, as Josh mentioned, for folks to investigate and learn so that they can understand what and who they can trust. Together, there's never been so much focus on home ownership, ever. With all of that energy and the moment being now, we've got an opportunity to do that. I could talk forever.
We all could.
But I would say at this point,
open the door and go in.
Yeah, open the door and go in. Let's go.
Yeah.
So let me just close with something that we're just now getting started. And so I think every organization has to find a way that it can do something impactful in its community. And the Census Bureau is located in Suitland, Maryland, and Prince George's County, Maryland, a predominantly African American, and this is inside the Beltway, Prince George's County, so lower income African American community. And our professional staff comes from all over the country. And so one of the things that we're doing right now is we've started a partnership with Bowie State University and HCBU to sort of co-sponsor a data science program where our statisticians and demographers and economists work with the faculty there to establish a program in data science that has a lot of our use cases in it. If we get that up and running and it's successful, our hope is then we are going to translate that back into PG County public schools and hopefully build a pipeline. So this all came out of a thing. We were sitting around a table one day and we said, wouldn't it be nice when a kid drives by the Census Bureau and the school bus, when they're in grade school or junior high, that they think, wow, that's someplace I could work. And not only is it someplace I could work, I could be a leader of an institution like that. So I think, every organization has to find the thing that it can do in the community that it's in to make a difference. So thanks.
So one of my primary objectives, I believe, is to educate a lot of people on the potential that exists on the African continent. I think many worlds are, talented from a technological point of view, but one thing that is very unique about Africa is, in fact, its human resource. And my vision is to purely advocate for that particular human resource, right? So in a free market economy, in a free system, I believe that the human resource found on the African continent has the potential to service many organizations that exist in places such as America, the UK, Australia, primarily English-speaking territories. these organizations outsource a lot of their work to, let's say, India or the Philippines. And in many instances, these types of jobs that are outsourced will in fact never come back to spaces such as America. But the reality is that these particular jobs that are outsourced in these other territories are in fact not changing lives, right? Whereas if these particular jobs were directed to places on the African continent, such as South Africa, Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda, just to name a few, you'd be surprised as to how impactful those jobs would be, right? Because those jobs are very important to the lives that they actually impact. So the objective of even my presence here is to advocate for the African continent, is to sensitize bigger corporations of the potential that Africa has, that of the innate potential of the humanness that a lot of young people have, and just to ensure that we can drive sustainable change by creating jobs on the African continent. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Mine is quick and simple. I would just say, let's not forget about those that are in prison. Let's not forget about the stories, not because that they didn't do anything wrong, but because they're people with stories and different things. And I would just challenge everybody, let's look at how we can challenge those in power and those others, and then even make the investment to go in and invest in the lives of those that have gone through that. If not, we're going to continue having more victims, more recidivism, more prisons, all these things over, and then we're going to have generations continuing to follow. One of the biggest indicators for a child to end up in prison is if their parent is. And so at our foundation, Fourth Purpose, that's what we're focused on.
All right. I wish we had more time. Gosh. Is it time to go? Can I take up one question? Yeah. All right. You had your hand up. Go right ahead, ma'am.
I have a question. I am looking at the title of the session, Advancing Racial Equity. Equity means that all of us are not on the same level, but we should have the same opportunity. We have so many people that graduate from high school that can't get a job unless it's a bus driver or working at Walmart. But I noticed that white Americans, and I'm a teacher, so I know this, white Americans graduate from high school with no advanced degree, and they work in banks and corporate offices, and, where is the equity? We can never achieve racial equity or economic equity until we first be able to get jobs for our people, that jobs that are not that pay minimum wage. And I think, being here at the book conference, I think that all of us, and especially those of you who own corporations, should work to hire people and train them. There is nobody in this building that go on a job that's already trained for and already prepared. I've been teaching 40 years. I have all kinds of degrees. Not one of those degrees prepared me for what I'm doing in the classroom. And I think it's unfair that African Americans graduate from high school and cannot get a job where they can provide for a family. So I'm asking, this is my question, what will you do, or what are you doing right now to help African Americans, especially men, get jobs where they can have lower wages? 80% of the kids in Atlanta public schools are living in poverty. What can we do, and what are you doing to help those people or their families? Are you hiring them? I just want to know racial equity. That's what I'm asking about.
All right, gentlemen, I'm sorry, we don't really have time, ma'am, but they will be outside, and you'll be able to talk to them. But I will say one thing is, we have to begin teaching before kids even get to school. I knew how to read because my parents taught me how to read, how to write, how to count before I even entered the school. That doesn't take any money. That doesn't involve any of these people. So many young people, and not just black, but people in general, arrive even in preschool and don't know how to read and write. Museums all over the country are free. My parents took us to them. When we went to another city or whatever, we visited museums. If there was something going on, our summer vacations were spent at NAACP conventions because my parents were there. My dad would go to the convention, we would go hear the big speakers, but at the same time, my mom would take us out and help educate us about something that went on before I walked into that classroom. And we as parents, no matter who we are or what color we are, our opportunity for our children begins with us. You as a teacher, I'm sure, have had to put up with a lot of nonsense of kids who arrive at you and do not know how to read and write. That's our responsibility as parents. That's where the education really begins. And no matter how impoverished you are, to learn how to read and write are two of the most important things I ever learned how to do other than typing and driving. And I couldn't do those if I didn't know how to read and write. Okay?
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Let's put our hands together for this great panel.